Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining our weekly webinar series. My name is Stephen Rivas. I'm the product manager at WIN-911 Software. Today, we're going to be talking about setting up WIN-911 with FactoryTalk, and I'll show you guys a few tips and tricks to make sure everything goes smoothly. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using FactoryTalk 11, but this pretty much the same steps would be applied to the past couple versions of FactoryTalk. I'm going to be using their demo application that's included with it called the FTView demo. And throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please submit them through the GoToWebinar application. You'll notice there's that question section there. So as you go through, as I go through, if you have questions, put them in there. And then at the end of the presentation, I will try to answer those, try to answer as many of those as I can. So for this webinar, I'll show you guys a few slides and then we'll jump into a demo. So I want to get started by talking about where you need to install or deploy WIN-911 to connect to FactoryTalk. So if you have a local application, you'll need to install the WIN-911 FactoryTalk data source on the same server that your application is running on. The reason I say the data source needs to be installed is because we now support distributed installations, which means you can install different components of WIN-911 on different machines throughout your network. For example, you could have just the data source module installed on your FactoryTalk server, while the notification modules reside on another server within your DMZ. If you'd like to learn more about distributed installations, we just completed a webinar about them. I think it was last week, I'm not sure, but you can find it up on our website under the resources section. So go to resources and then webinars, and then you will see it there. If you're not sure if your application is local or not, you can check in either Studio or the admin console. So when you open in Studio, you'll see where it says local station. So if it says local station, you're going to want to have WIN-911 installed on that same machine. And if you open up the admin console, or once you open it in Studio, you'll see where it says Studio on the top of your Explorer pane. If you are running a network application, you can install WIN-911 data source on any server within your FactoryTalk directory. It doesn't have to be on the same server as FactoryTalk. It can be on any standalone server. However, you're going to have to have it join up to your FactoryTalk directory. Same thing, if you're not sure if your application is network or not, you'll know that it's pretty obvious here. When you open up an application, it will say that here, or in your Explorer pane, it will say network at the top. If you do a standalone, or if you do install WIN-911 on a standalone server, so you install WIN-911 by itself without the FactoryTalk stuff there, what you're going to want to do is install the FactoryTalk client software. You want to install that on this machine because it puts all the backend services that we need to communicate with an alarm and event server on that machine. You also need it there to join the directory anyway. So when you are running WIN-911 on a standalone server, you need to join that FactoryTalk directory. And installing the FactoryTalk client software is just the quickest way to get all the alarm and events backend stuff that you need on that machine to get it connected. You do not need to license this client software, so you don't need a license or anything like that. You just need to put it on that machine. So that is some info about network applications. And the next thing I want to cover is Rockwell's multiplexer services. This has been something that's been ongoing, kind of as a problem for us for the last couple of years. I think since around FactoryTalk 9. There are two services that, well, there are several services that WIN-911 interacts with, and two of those are the Rockwell Alarm multiplexer and the Rockwell Event multiplexer. Depending on the version of FactoryTalk you're running, you'll need to change these services to run under the local system account instead of the local service or network service account. I'm going to show you changing this in the demo. If you don't make these changes, WIN-911 is not going to be able to communicate with FactoryTalk alarm and events. And the reason that you're having to change this is because it's causing decom issues and things aren't able to authenticate and the different components are not able to talk to each other, more or less. So it's a simple change. I've talked to Rockwell about it. It's not going to harm your system in any way. But once you make that change, of course, you need to restart those servers. But like I said, I'm going to show you that in the demo here because we're going to go. I don't really I have parts of WIN-911 set up in the demo, and we're just going to try. We'll go through and set up different components. So this needs to be done on pretty much any new installation. So this is very important. FactoryTalk user account. WIN-911 needs to be configured with the user account to access FactoryTalk. You can define a FactoryTalk user, so a local user, or you can create a Windows linked account, which is my preference as it seems to eliminate some permissions issues we've seen in the product support department. Specifically, I would use the Windows account that is running the WIN-911 services. All the WIN-911 services run under a specified Windows account, and that is the user account I typically specify as a Windows linked account within FactoryTalk. Whether you're using a Windows linked account or a local account, you also want to change or you also want to set the password to never expire and not let the user change it in case a curious operator comes along and decides to change it. That would break WIN-911's connectivity into FactoryTalk because it would no longer be able to authenticate. Now I want to talk about a little bit about organizing alarms. When you're creating alarms or organizing them, it is recommended that you group similar alarms together, especially if you're going to be notifying different sets of operators depending on the alarms. FactoryTalk allows you to group alarms together in two ways. The old way is the alarm class, and the kind of new way is alarm groups, which is what my screenshot is showing here. When WIN-911 subscribes to alarms, well, it subscribes to alarms based on different alarm properties, which are the alarm name, alarm class, alarm group, and alarm severity. So, for example, if you had alarms in FactoryTalk assigned to group A, you can easily create an alarm subscription for group A and then send those alarms to the responsible people. And anytime you add new alarms to group A, those alarms will automatically come into WIN-911 and notify the responsible respective people. The same would be true for any of these subscriptions you set up. You could then create another subscription for alarms in group B and direct those alarms to a different set of operators. So it ends up creating a very easy way to set up escalation in WIN-911. If you don't have a way to group your alarms together or you just haven't done it, then what you're going to end up having to do is set up alarm subscriptions based on your. Can you guys hear me now? All right, great. Sorry about that. My headset died. I just charged it just before the webinar as well. I'm not sure why. Something always has to go wrong. All right, so I was just talking about grouping alarms. If you don't have a way to group your alarms together, then what you end up having happen is that you have to create a bunch of subscriptions based on alarm name, which is very tedious, and you end up having a lot of subscriptions when you could have just had just a few based on grouping. I've seen some systems with up to 50 or 100 alarm subscriptions because of this. It makes maintenance a bit of a nightmare. So if you could give some consideration to how your alarms are going to be notified through WIN-911 when you're creating them or when you're going through an existing system and reorganizing them, then that's going to save you some time when you're setting up WIN-911. So for example, here, again, I've got the screenshot here of an alarm and event setup. This is tag-based alarms, but the same is true for device-based alarms. It does not matter. So if I have those two groups there, Group A and Group B, I can create a subscription in WIN-911 that filters on Group A. And when I set that up in my data source settings, I can say alarms that belong to Group A subscription are going to go to my Group A strategy. And a strategy represents who's going to be notified for that particular alarm. And again, this is all dynamic. So anytime you add new alarms to either one of those groups, it's automatically comes into WIN-911. There's nothing to import. It's just all automatic. Next thing I want to cover are watchdog alarms. I think these are fairly underutilized. So WIN-911 can create an alarm in the event of a connection loss. Again, we call these watchdogs. They work by monitoring an alarm class for a changing alarm state, which means you need to create an alarm in your alarm and event server that changes state automatically. When you create the alarm, I would uncheck this act required checkbox. I don't have a screenshot of that, but I can show you that in the demo. So the alarm doesn't actually need to be acknowledged. We just need to see a changing state from it. In your alarm summary in your FactoryTalk client, you would want to create a filter so that you filter that alarm out because it would just be popping in and out all the time, and that would clutter up your summary and probably distract your operators. But if we don't see this alarm update within the set timeout period, then what will happen is that alarm gets generated, and then you can send this alarm to whoever is responsible for the WIN-911 system and say, hey, alarms aren't being received from FactoryTalk. You need to go do something about it because no one's going to be notified about alarms. So this is just a way to monitor that connection to FactoryTalk. Now, I get asked a lot about like a heartbeat to FactoryTalk, and unfortunately, there's no way for us to implement a data poke or a heartbeat in WIN-911, as there's no way to write process values back to FactoryTalk through the alarm and event toolkit. However, you can simulate this by creating an alarm that automatically changes on a timer, similar to the Watchdog, and then have WIN-911 act the alarm anytime it comes in. So if the alarm were to remain unacknowledged, then it's no longer running. And you could write a script in FactoryTalk to check to see if the alarm remains unacknowledged for a certain amount of time, because this is all running on an interval. And if it were, then you could take some action within FactoryTalk. I don't have an example script for you guys today, but that's something I'll work on and get published on our knowledge base. Something I've been meaning to do anyway, so I will take that action item on for you guys and get that posted sometime after this webinar. Again, you'd want to filter this alarm, this health alarm, from your alarm summary, because it's going to come in and out and would be distracting to anybody watching the alarm summary. One last thing to cover is, before we go to the demo, is the contacts utility. Last year we released it, which allows operators to make changes to call out lists and schedules without needing to access the full WIN-911 configuration. You can create a button in your HMI screen to launch this utility as well, and that way the operator never needs to leave the HMI, as this will appear on top of your FactoryTalk client. This is included with every license level of WIN-911, so you don't need to purchase this. All right, let's see here. All right, so let's go to the live demo real quick. All right, so I'm running server 2019 here with FactoryTalk 11 installed. The first thing I wanted to show you guys is the multiplexer service, because WIN-911 cannot connect to it without making this change. Just very simple to do. If you go to your services, go to Rockwell, you will see in FactoryTalk 11, the Rockwell Alarm multiplexer. I realize now I spelled it wrong in my presentation. Is set to network service. So what we want to do is go to properties, go to log on, change it to local system account, hit apply, say okay, and then you need to restart it. So now it will run under this account instead. In some cases, it may say local service, like it says here, then you would still want to change it to local system. In this version, the event multiplexer has been changed back to local system. They've been changing it around for years, but they've changed event multiplexer back to local system already. So in 11, you don't have to make that change. So once you make the change, restart it, and then you're good to go on that end. Actually, I'm gonna leave that up because I want to talk about the Windows linked account real quick. When you install Win-911, all the runtimes are installed as services, and you can see them here. So here's the FactoryTalk A&E runtime, and that is running under a local account called Spectre that I have on this machine. Now, I mentioned I want to, when you set up Win-9 FactoryTalk, you should use a Windows linked account that is the same as the account running Win-911. So I would add this account into FactoryTalk. I think I've already added that one in here, so I'll go to Studio and just double check. No, I have not. So let's add him in real quick. So go to Windows linked account, add. Sorry, this charging cable for the headset's getting in my way. Spectre. Say OK, and then I'll say OK. Now I've added it in. I would want to go set that account to not the password never expire, can't change password. And you also need to be a part of the administrators group so that you can acknowledge alarms. And so now I've got this user in FactoryTalk, so I can enter this into your Win-911 configuration when connecting to the FactoryTalk Alarm and Event Server. So if you're not familiar with this demo, the way it works is with a tag-based alarm and event server. And these steps would be true even if it was a device-based alarm and event server. Win-911 will support device-based, tag-based. It doesn't matter if alarm types as well. The name escapes me is what they're calling them. The new alarm types are supported as well. So what we're going to do now is just go configure the connection, the data source connection in Win-911. So I've got that loaded here. I'll go to Alarming, FactoryTalk, Applications, and add a new application. So we've got a few fields here. The first one is the name. I can put anything I want in here. This is a user-defined field, so you can put a friendly name there that gives more meaning to the application name. So I wanted to make sure I had the application name right. You can give a description as well. So you want to then choose your application type. We know this is networked because it says network at the top. So I'll choose network and then type in my application name. Now this is case sensitive, so it needs to match exactly what you have at the top of your Explorer pane here. If it does not match that, it's not going to work. So all right, guys, I'm just gonna switch to my laptop microphone, so don't have to worry about the headset anymore. I think it died again, so we can go back to. All right, you should still be able to hear me, so let me go back to the demo. All right, so we need to specify the username that I just added to FactoryTalk. So I'll put the server name / you got to put it in exactly as it appears here, 2019-Steven/Spectre. So we're going to go do that. And then type your password. And then we can test the connection. Once it's successful, we know we've got the credentials right. A thing I didn't cover in my presentation is language switching. This is somewhat new. It used to be that WIN-911 always subscribed to the English language that was, or English alarm messages that were specified in FactoryTalk, even if you weren't using them. So you'd get, for your description, if you weren't using those, you'd get something like the US English is not defined for this alarm. If you are not using US English, you can browse your application for the languages that are supported and choose which alarm messages you want to receive. You can also subscribe to alarm and events, so we support the new event types, or you can just choose alarms if you only want to get alarms. And then we have good quality events only at the bottom. This will have WIN-911 omit comm alarms from being notified. Usually when you get a comm alarm, you're going to get a bunch of them at the same time, and you don't typically want that. All right, let me minimize. Just wanted to make sure things are still going good. All right, great. Okay, let's jump over to Studio so we can talk a little bit about the alarms. Specifically, what I want to talk about right now is the Watchdog Alarm. I don't have anything defined right now, so if I click the plus button, I can start typing it in. You can create multiple Watchdog alarms if you were monitoring different alarm and event servers. If your application has multiple alarm and event servers, you could potentially create multiple Watchdogs. So I'll just call this FactoryTalk or FactoryTalk connection loss. And then the description, you just want to put some description of what action you would want someone to take given the situation, give them some context as to what's going on. WIN-911 lost connection, FactoryTalk, fix it. And it used to be with the older WIN-911 version 7 that you had to type the exact alarm name you wanted to monitor, and that was pretty tedious because you had to get it exactly right. So instead of doing that, we just monitor a class that you define. So the default one in here is called Watchdog. I believe I've actually entered it into FactoryTalk with a capital W. So what we'll do is go look at that. I've created this Watchdog group and I've created this Watchdog alarm. It's tied to an HMI tag, the second tag, and it will create an alarm whenever it goes over 30. So whenever it goes below 30, it's inactive. I've also unchecked this acknowledgement required checkbox so that it doesn't need to be acknowledged. So that way it actually clears every time it returns to normal. The alarm class is set right here. This is what we're monitoring for when we're setting up the Watchdog. So that is what we're going to be monitoring for. You can use, if you're using a PLC instead of tag-based servers, I mean, you could still use a system tag. Some type of timer to automatically generate this alarm. So I've got the class entered in here. I've got a timeout. I like to set the timeout to something like something that's not an interval of 30. So I'll put like, we'll put 95. And the severity, you can set the severity to how you want. That really depends on if you're using, if you're taking advantage of severity in your escalation. So we'll put that to the top since that would be pretty bad if when no one's not talking to FactoryTalk. And then you can choose the strategy that you want to notify or send this to. So I've got one called admin alarm, so I'll set that, and then I can click save. But I'm gonna go over to, you know what, I'll just go ahead and save this one real quick. All right, so I've set up the Watchdog, I've set up the data source connection. So let's talk about the actual subscriptions. I've created a few already. So the ones from the presentation, I've created a group A subscription and a group B. When you create one, it looks essentially like this. You have all these things to filter on. At the top, you can choose specifically if you want to be filtering on alarms and events, or alarms specifically or events specifically. When you choose which criteria you want to filter on, you can just say all names, all classes, all groups, all severities. That would get you every alarm in the system. We don't want to do that. But if you choose one of these specific, you have these options to choose between wildcard, regular expression, contains or does not contain. Now, each one of these sections are ANDed together. So if I had something in here, that means the alarm has to have alarm in the name, and it has to belong to group A. So when you're setting these up, just remember that between the different categories, these things are ANDed together. I don't want to have that there, so I'm going to leave that to specific groups for group A. I've also assigned a label. I'm not going to cover advanced tactics today. We have other webinars that go into more detail about how you can utilize advanced tactics. We just wanted to specifically talk about connection into FactoryTalk today. So this is a completed group A subscription. I've already created, I don't need to save it again. I've also created one for group B, and it's just filtering alarms on group B and assigning a label of group B. Now for the health alarm, I do need to create a subscription for that. So I've created a subscription for health alarm. It's looking for a group for alarms in a group called health alarm. If I go back to Studio, I've got my health alarm group here, and this is the alarm. I'm doing the same thing as the automatically generating alarm, looking at the same HMI tag. This one does need to be acknowledged because WIN-911 is going to acknowledge it every time it sees it. So that is that. So what we're going to do is close. We don't need this anymore, so we'll close that. Actually, we'll leave it open so I can add an alarm to one of those groups after we're monitoring it. Okay, so after you create your subscriptions, you have to assign them to your application, and you do this on the routes tab. So if we go into routes, we can add a new one. We want to select our subscription of group A and send it to the respective strategy. So I have a strategy for group A, and I have a strategy for group B. And then I also want to do my health alarm one. So health alarm, I've got a strategy that will automatically acknowledge the alarm, and that's all it does. It doesn't notify anybody. It will, as soon as it gets the alarm, it'll hack it so that you know that WIN-911 is connected to it. So once I've got those set up, I can hit save. And at this point, WIN-911 should start receiving those alarms. So what we're going to do is go from the log viewer. And go to our client. Let's see, that's the health alarm that came in. So it should get automatically acknowledged. Well, it should get automatically acknowledged. Let's go check out my strategy, make sure I have it set up correctly. It should be hacking it. Of course, always something goes wrong, like I said. Let's go trigger these other alarms here. Go to alarms on. That should trigger every alarm in the system. I also have a filter set up, so you see the health alarm is showing up here. If I select my filter, it will take it out. Of course, none of the alarms are coming on for some reason. Let's go check out my alarm event server. None of them are coming on, other than this tank pressure one. I don't know what's going on right now. Of course, my demo was working before, now it's not working. Well, I don't know that I can sit here and troubleshoot why FactoryTalk is not generating the alarms that I want. Let's try to set everything to normal. Let's go to new. Let's try this real quick. I don't know that this will work, but we can try it just to toggle one through the console. I have a feeling this doesn't work, but we'll try. Nope, didn't generate the alarm either. Well, sorry guys, I don't know why my alarms aren't triggering now. I mean, I can filter this tank 1 pressure alarm, so that's in the urgent priority group. So let's just create, I will at least want to show you guys the alarm coming in. So let's go set up a filter for that. Call this urgent. Subscription. Yep. Go to specific group. And save that, go back to my application and assign that to it. So add that in. Urgent priority. I'll just set that to the default strategy, save it. And give it a moment and that will come through. At least it should, but I have a feeling something is more broken than I think it is. You know what? I restarted that service and I bet you I need to restart more things. Let's just, I don't know, we won't restart, that'll take too long. When you restart this service, I bet I probably shouldn't have left that for the demo. I probably should have done that ahead of time. Let me restart again. I could have just did this one, it would have restarted more stuff. While that's restarting, I wanted to show you guys the contacts utility. I've embedded a button here into my HMI screen, so if I click this, it will launch it. And the contacts utility, again, allows you to change your call out list. So I have a group A call out list. I think it's just got me in it. So here it is. If I want to add someone else to it, then I can hit the plus button, choose someone else, Tom Jones, and say okay. And if I wanted Tom Jones to get notified before me, I could just move him up in the list and hit save. And then that's all you have to do. You don't have to go into the full WIN-911 configuration. You just need to do it in here. Also, if you want to change schedules on those connections, I only have 2 defined in WIN-911. I can come to the connections tab and choose the schedule I want to assign to them. So if I want to go from always to never, I can hit save. I can also change the roles assigned to this person, which is helpful if you're using advanced tactics and strategies. So that is the contacts utility. I also wanted to show you I'll close that out. The new announcer, this is a text-to-speech announcer for alarms in WIN-911. What it will do is, as it receives alarms, it will verbalize them over the speakers of the computer. This thing can run remotely from your WIN-911 system, so it's networkable. It just happens to be running on the same machine as WIN-911 right now, but if it was on a different machine, you could specify its location, and then it will subscribe to alarms from that WIN-911 system and announce them over the speakers of the computer. If it were to lose connection with your WIN-911 system, you can have a connection warning that says WIN-911 announcer is not connected. Alarms will not be announced. You can also just edit that and make it say whatever you like. We also have the Say As tab that lets you convert original text to converted text, because not everything will always sound so great passed through a text-to-speech engine. So if we find any of these things on the left, these are just examples, then we can convert them into this text before going into a text-to-speech engine, which allows you to make changes one time instead of multiple times across many, many alarms. And the last thing I'll mention on this is alarm format. The alarm format is a kind of, you can type in anything that you want and insert alarm properties as you like. So right now it's got tag description, condition description, active state, and act state. If I wanted to add a time, I can say go over here, choose insert alarm property, and then put active state. I'm not active state, sorry, I wanted to go to active time. So I'll go over to active time, and then it shows you the time there. And you can change the format of that as well. All right, so I'm going to close that out. We can save them. It will run down here in your system tray, so I don't want it to actually do anything, so I'll close that. Let me see if that helped anything. It made it worse. So sorry about that, guys. I don't know what's going on with the demo. I mean, it was working this morning, and now I can't get the alarms to work. Oh, this one couldn't even stop. So, all right, I'm gonna jump back to my presentation and not waste any more of y'all's time with that. A FactoryTalk install checklist. A lot of what I talked about is in this install checklist that we created. It's on our website, WIN-911.com. If you go to resources and documentation, you'll see the install checklist section, and you can click on FactoryTalk. It's a long PDF that talks about what you need to do to get your FactoryTalk connection working, which obviously I guess I could use right now. And then the notifier section show you what you need to do for different notifiers, to get those working. For example, what you need to know about VoIP before you go to the plant to set up WIN-911. So that's available, and it's been available for a while. We're doing these weekly webinars. So the next one that we're coming up with will be for installation tips and tricks, just installing WIN-911 in general. The next one after that will be about InTouch, similar to what we're doing here, and then GEI fix after that. So if you're interested in any of those, you can go to WIN-911.com/webinars and sign up for those. We'll send invites out each week for those as we progress through them. A few things that we're working on right now at WIN-911 is a new desktop UI, which is going to replace our Silverlight UI with a WPF desktop application. So it'll still be networkable, just so you can access your WIN-911 configuration from anywhere within your network, but it will be a desktop app instead. This will help us remove our dependency on IIS. So if you struggle to work with IIS, we feel your pain, and we're going to be getting rid of it so that you don't have to use it anymore, which will result in a decrease of resource usage, so memory usage and CPU usage on your system. We're also working on redundancy for an automatic failover to a backup WIN-911 system. What we mean by this is that you'll have at least two WIN-911 systems, and the configurations for them will sync together, so you don't need to do some of the things you have to do today with the hot backup, write a script, and then make changes on both systems all the time. So it'll be a full redundancy option. And if we can get to it this year, we would like to create an OPC UA alarm and conditions data source connection. think that if this happens, it's going to be closer to the end of the year, if not early next year. Feature requests. If you have any feature requests that you'd like to submit to us, we do have a website, features.win911.com, where you can come and submit them. If there's something there already that someone else has submitted, you can vote on it and push it up to the top, so it make it the most popular feature request, which makes it more likely that we would implement that one, or at least sooner. You can also add your comments to it to give your particular use case for what you're looking for that feature. So I really encourage you guys to use this so that we know exactly what you're wanting us to do moving forward. So go ahead and start the Q&A, and let me pull those up real quick. There's going to be a bunch of sound things in here, so it might take me a while to scroll through. Be very painful to grab that. All right, so let's start from the top here. Question was, did you say WIN-911 had to be installed on the FactoryTalk server, or could it be a FactoryTalk client machine? If it's a local system, I was specifically talking about local applications. If it's a local application, then it's got to be installed on that local server. If it's a network application, it can be installed on a client machine, or it can be installed on a machine with no client actually running, but the client software has to be installed. So if it's local, WIN-911's got to be running on that local server. If it's network, then WIN-911 can technically be running on any machine as long as it is part of the directory. Let me go down here. This one says this is usually from an HMI tag. I'm going to guess that was maybe from a Watchdog or the health alarm. It can be an HMI tag, or it could also be a PLC tag. That's up to you and how you want to set it up. Either way will be fine. How do you prevent alarms from sending notifications? If it is a new alarm, I still want to see it in my alarm summary in FactoryTalk, but disable the notification temporarily. So we don't currently have a way to do alarm bypass in WIN-911. The easiest way to do that, I think, would be to go to if you had that alarm and it was tied to a subscription in WIN-911, you could come in here, and if you know you don't want to notify on that alarm. So let's say I don't want group A alarms right now. I could change my strategy to do not notify and click save, and then it would stop notifying. Now that obviously takes manual steps to do. So other than that, we don't currently have a way to automatically suspend notifications for a particular alarm. So I hope that answers your question. Is the log viewer also part of the WIN-911 license? Yes, everything I showed, the log viewer is part of the WIN-911 license, the contacts utility is part of it, and the announcer is part of it. The alarms on this demo trigger from the PLC randomly. You won't see alarms generated until specific alarms you're looking for. So there's two types of alarms in this demo. There are the alarm 101, alarm 02, and then there are some that are coming from the PLC that are random. So that's what the what was it called? Tank 1 pressure. That's what that alarm is. And then there are the other alarms that just say alarm 01, alarm 02. And those all get generated from those buttons, which is for whatever reason not working. So I did reset it. I don't know if it's worth going back over here just to look. Now there's all quality errors. So anyway. All right.
Is the Rockwell Alarm multiplexer account to be changed on the server hosting FTAE or on the FT client with WIN-911? Just the client that WIN-911 runs on. You don't need to make the change if you're on the server machine, just where WIN-911 is installed. Zach, you asked, how did you set that up? I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, is it ActiveX? I wonder if you're talking about the contacts utility, the button. It's just a button to an executable. I'm gonna assume that's what you're talking about. So if I go back to it and edit this button, the action is to just do an app start on the contacts utility, which is an executable that's installed on this machine. So that when you don't have it on here anymore. When you download WIN-911, there's a tools folder, and in that tools folder, you'll find the install for the contacts utility, and you can install this on any machine within your network, so it's networkable. You don't have to run it on the WIN-911 machine. You can run it on a remote machine, so you can make changes remotely. Yeah, so I guess I just answered that. I hope I answered that one for you, Scott, too. Does the announcer affect how alarms are vocalized when called out or only locally announced? Just right now, it's just for the locally announced. It does not affect the voice notification method. We are in the new UI that we're working on. We're going to implement some of the things we did for the announcer for the voice module, so that we can do the same things there. I think that's probably what you're looking for. Any tips for iconic alarm imports? I mean, the only way that we connect to iconics right now is through OPC. I don't recall if the import, if that supports the interface that we use for imports. I have to follow up with you to get more information about that. Can you email the slide and recording? The recording will be sent to you guys after the webinars. It'll be sent out tomorrow. I can include a link to the slides on that. I didn't have that in there already, but I can add that in. What is the time frame for redundancy? So the number one priority for us now is the new UI. So I think the redundancy will come closer to the end of the year. When we get closer to a more in-depth design for redundancy, we'll be reaching out to some of you guys to get your input on that. Make sure we're solving the problems that you guys have. How to monitor more than one FTAE FactoryTalk alarm and event network distributed area. So if you have multiple applications in WIN-911, I've added one application. If there are multiple applications you want to monitor, you have to have a license to monitor more than one. I'm using the demo license, which lets me monitor a single application. If I wanted to monitor a second one, I need to have the license for it, and then I can click the plus button and add it. Now, that application has to be in the same directory. It cannot be in a different directory because we won't be able to connect to it. Oh, and also just to add into that, if you have an application with multiple alarm and event servers under it, when you connect to that application, you're connecting to all the alarm and event servers in that application. You don't have to specify different areas or anything like that. As long as those alarm and event servers are in your application, then they'll be subscribed to by WIN-911 when you set up that single application. Do you have a document that would walk us through using the FT demo project to test Win? No, I don't have a documentation that talks about the FT demo specifically, but that wouldn't be difficult. I mean, we could definitely take that on and add it to one of our quick start guides. You can filter severity. You can filter severity. That's in the subscriptions here. If I go to subscriptions, that's also another way that some people have grouped their alarms. They'll say alarms that have severity of 911 will be called out. And then they make those changes on the FactoryTalk side. So if they want an alarm to be called out, they assign it to severity 911. And when they don't want it to be called out, they change the severity, and now it's no longer being called out. So you can do that. How do you convert from a voice call to a text message? You can't convert a voice call to a text message. You'd have to set up a different notification method. You'd have to have a voice connection set up, and you'd have to have either SMS or email set up. So it's up to you which one you would want to do. But there's no easy conversion for that if that's what you mean. Last I checked, FTAE and shelf suppress features were not supported. Is that something you're looking? Has already been done. So we are looking at doing that. We've done some things in our core libraries to support shelving. We haven't implemented those yet, but that is something that will come likely in the next version, which the next version is when we will release the new UI, which will be version 5. WIN-911 able to show other FTA alarm attributes, those 4 values? No, I know what you're talking about, those 4 additional strings or whatever you want. I don't know what actually you can type in there, but no, not currently, but that's something that we've talked about and will likely add in the future. That we're getting more and more feature requests for that. Is there a way to affect how alarms are vocalized in a call out? What time is it? Oh, I'm well over. Oh, no, I'm not over. I've got 7 more minutes here. Is there a way to affect how alarms are vocalized in a call out? Example, WIN-911, WIN-911. Yeah, so I guess that's what you're going for, Troy. Yeah, right now, there is a way technically to do it with the XSL formats, but you'd have to have them loaded in you'd have to have a bunch of them loaded in your format. If you can email me after this, Troy, I could show you how you could do that. It wouldn't be as easy as the announcer though, but again, that's something that we are working on for the next version. So if an alarm is disabled in FactoryTalk Viewer shelved, does that prevent WIN-911 from seeing it? If it's suppressed, we still see it. So it's because we're not paying attention to that tag. How do you set up multiple watchdogs for multiple FTAE servers? You just do the same thing that I did. You just do the same thing that I did for that one tag in FactoryTalk. And then when you come to the watchdogs, you would add another one. You click the plus button and you can add another one. So you could just be like server #2 connection lost, whatever you'd want to put in there. And then your watchdog would still need to be assigned to this class. You could put a different class if you want. You could type anything you would like in there. But over here, you'd have another server and you'd put the same type of alarm in there. So it was automatically generating alarms. Is it only Out Company that is having issues with Android in the WIN-911 app? It is super slow and sometimes doesn't page out. Are you talking about the new, Christopher, are you talking about the new mobile app? If so, please follow up with me and I can get that sorted out for you. Can you tag to actual plant location? Scott, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Can you expand on that for me? Can you tag to actual plant location? I suppose you could put that in like the alarm message field, but if that's what you're talking about, I'm not quite sure. Okay, well, that was the last question from you guys. So if there aren't any more, that is going to conclude the webinar. I will send an email out tomorrow with the recording, and I'll also include the slides with that so that you can take a look at those as well. Let's see what Scott say. A specific overview indicator alarms. Scott, I'm still not quite sure what you mean. If you can follow up with me after this webinar, I can answer that question for you in more detail. Um, so just contact me at steven.revis@win911.com, and I can answer any questions you got offline. All right, so that's conclude the webinar. Thanks everybody for joining me this morning. I hope everybody is staying safe out there. We'll be back next week with another webinar. Thanks again. Bye.